Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Human Synergistics Strategic Culture Journey, featuring the change story and journey of Erdman. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared within the next few days. At the end of the session, we will be addressing questions, so be sure to use the questions feature in your GoToWebinar panel, and we will address as many questions as the time allows. You can change to the next slide. I'm Allison Hudipole, Director of Culture and Leadership at Human Synergistics. I've had the pleasure of working and collaborating throughout the years with our colleagues at Erdman. Erdman provides consulting, architecture, engineering, and construction services to healthcare and senior living organizations, having completed more than 6,000 projects nationally over their 70-plus-year history. Now to introduce our presenters. Rustin Becker is the president and CEO, leads Erdman's multidisciplinary team of experts. He's focused on maintaining the firm's steady growth through differentiated offerings, a spirit of innovation, and a constructive culture anchored in Erdman's values and common purpose. Brian Hepp, chairman and company owner, as a tenured Erdman executive, Brian has led the organization through uncertainties and changes in the healthcare and senior living industries. His leadership and vision have positioned the firm for long-term sustained growth as a trusted partner built on a nationally ranked culture of constructive leadership and values. And last but not least, Andrea Andy, as I know her, Hopkins, leads Erdman's strategic culture and organizational development as Senior Vice President of Organizational Development and Human Resources. As a member of the senior leadership team, she serves as Erdman's culture champion, focusing on major change initiatives, developing measurable training programs, providing extensive coaching, and leading process improvements. You can advance to the next slide. Prior to me handing it over to our colleagues from Erdman, I'd like to share some background information on some of the assessments that will be highlighted in their journey. We'll be focusing both on organizational culture and leadership development. And as we both know, these two go hand in hand. And as we often say, are two sides of the same coin. So the importance of having a way to measure the two, as well as provide a common language, led to the use of some of these assessments, including the Organizational Culture Inventory, or OCI, that's used to measure behavioral norms and expectations, looking at what is expected of members to fit in and meet those expectations. On the leadership side, the use of the Leadership Impact, or LI, looks at the strategies leaders use in either a prescriptive or restrictive way to drive or motivate behaviors in others that ultimately leads to their overall effectiveness as a leader. And lastly, the Lifestyles Inventory that measures the individual's thinking and behavioral styles and provides awareness in terms of how to create that greater individual effectiveness. So the beauty of using the assessments is the use of the circumplex. So the circumplex provides a common language and framework in order to create that greater level of effectiveness at all levels of the organization, whether looking at the culture, the leaders, or the individuals. So the circumplex is divided into two dimensions. When we split it in half vertically, we're looking at people versus task orientation. And when we split it in half horizontally, we're looking at how we attain our higher order level satisfaction needs versus lower order security needs. And we look at these different dimensions through three clusters, as you can see represented by three colors, the blue, green, and red. So the blue represent the constructive styles that encourage the attainment of organizational goals through people development. They promote teamwork and synergy and enhance individual, group, and organizational adaptability and effectiveness. Where the passive defensive or green styles lead people to subordinate themselves to the organization, stifle creativity and initiative, and allow the organization to stagnate. And lastly, the aggressive defensive or red styles lead people to focus on their own needs at the expense of those of their group and organization, and often lead to stress, turnover, and inconsistent performance. Now providing this grounding in the model, I'd like to hand it over to Brian to kick off the conversation and provide some more background on Erdman. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Allison, and thanks everybody for being here. We're excited to share our story with you all. Erdman is a national healthcare and senior living real estate solutions company. We've been around for quite a while. And in-house, we have consultants, designers, architects, all engineering disciplines, and construction managers. So we're really focused on culture in order for us to have all of those different talents and backgrounds work well together, focusing on our client solution rather than competing with each other. So I've been here going on 24 years now, and we've gone through 2 culture journeys during that time period. The first, back in 2001, we were a second generation family owned organization, and the family entertained selling the business outright. And so at that time, me and my business partners launched a culture initiative, really to focus on, how do we improve our dynamics as an organization and the behaviors in the organization? While we were making money, we were not doing as well as we could have, and really not leveraging people's talents across the organization. We had a lot of passive aggressive behaviors. A department and individualism was pretty rampant around here. We implemented an employee engagement survey that turned out to be very low, especially for the leadership team. The positive thing is we were in a good market at the time in healthcare. We just needed a lot of internal change. So we launched work with our senior leadership team, hired an external coach, and really got focused on leadership development, self-awareness, etc. We also launched a leadership academy at that time, and really grabbed, I'd say, our top talent. And sorry, we're getting a notice up here. Grabbed our top talent and really kind of freed them up to be culture champions through the organization. From 2001 to 2008, we quadrupled our pipeline, quadrupled our earnings, our survey scores increased every single year we did this effort. And then we ended up selling to a publicly traded company. We were a subsidiary of theirs in 2008. And as we all know, the Great Recession hit, and in 2009, we're downsizing the organization dramatically. I will tell you, during that time period, executive leadership is critical. The philosophy you have around culture and what type of environment you want stems from your executive team. And so we had a quick culture change, I'll say, here in the organization during that recession, with a lot of stressful times, a lot of decision making, and people keeping their head down. You notice I'm going from red to green. That's intentional, these colors. We had the opportunity to buy the business back in 2012, so we did that, and started our era 2, I guess, of our culture journey. At that time, our scores were average, so we weren't broke like we were in 01. We just had to leverage up our management team and our talent here. We needed to rebuild the senior leadership team at that time. The other challenge we had was there were significant market changes going on in healthcare due to the Affordable Care Act. So we really needed to up our game in terms of collaboration, professionalism, etc. And had a lot of difficult challenges in the marketplace at that time. We also brought in another external coach and started work on the SLT, giving them the opportunity to step in or step out, I'll say, and really then started some leadership journeys with our teams, as Andy and Rustin will explain more in a little bit here. Today, we're in a really good spot. We're continuing to grow leaders and advancing our culture. You're going to see some of the results of our journey so far in a little bit here. So 5 things I just wanted to really make you aware of for considerations of your culture journey. And the first one here, I think, is extremely important. Make culture part of your strategy and give it equal importance as you would your business development and your operations. We do a lot of work here strategically about defining what good looks like and what kind of organization we want, and embedding the behaviors we want in this organization culturally. Assess your leadership team's capacity to make the journey. I'll tell you, not everybody wants to do culture work on them and leadership work on themselves, but you need that as your leadership team to cascade that through the organization. Not everybody will make the journey, so be prepared for that. Create long-term vision and short-term plans. We do annual planning every year with initiatives around our culture and behaviors that we want to drive in the organization. And then never let up. This isn't miracle work here. This is just consistency and persistence every day around leadership development and the behavior that you want to see demonstrated in your organization. Think of creating new good habits and breaking bad ones, so to speak. And then invite key leaders and team members throughout your organization to be part of the great work you're doing and to be culture champions. We have a leadership academy and now an Inspire program that's 12-month programs we put people through to give them the tools and great skills to really champion culture work as well as be the best people they can be. So in addition, we spent a lot of time back in 2012 and 13 on vision, mission, and values. Our vision is improving every life we touch, and you hear our staff talk about that. We center our organization around that, and really it's a rallying point for us. We also spent a lot of time on defining our values as well as leadership competencies. These are all behavioral based, so you're measuring how often these are demonstrated by our team members. And that group of skill sets there is 60% of an evaluation we conduct from the executive team all the way down to throughout the organization. So while technical skill set is very important, we put heavier emphasis on behavioral skill sets that we want to see in the organization. And you'll hear more about that in a little bit.
So I think it's important to share relative to those values that those values were generated through employee teams and a consensus building process. They're not values that were created through the senior leadership team and pushed down into the organization. With that consensus building and the buy-in from the employees in the organization, it allows us to really leverage them as the foundation of our strategic plan in terms of how we want everyone in the organization to treat each other. What are the ground rules that we expect around behavior, and where can we identify individuals that are truly exceptional in terms of living into those values? And we use those as we try and drive the organization towards our vision and mission that Brian was outlining. And as part of making culture strategic, it is one of our 3 strategic pillars. And the planning process at Erdman, basically on the even numbered years like 2022, we will completely rewrite our strategic plan. So we start with validating the frame that we have, that the plan sits within. We will analyze our markets, we'll look at alternatives and build a full plan. On the alternating odd numbered years like 2021, what we will do is validate, is there anything that's really significant that has changed any of our approach around market or delivery, and do we need to go through a full assessment? But the 3 pillars that we have, the first is around market. So this is really looking at, how will healthcare evolve or change, or similarly, how will senior living evolve or change over that next 5-year period of time? And obviously, healthcare has been extremely dynamic. If you look back towards 2008 and the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, it really fundamentally changed the market that we serve. And then you layer on a pandemic, which certainly has been very disruptive over the last 2 years. The second strategic pillar is delivery. So delivery is around the services that we provide. How do teams work to basically solve problems with our clients through the solutions that we're generating based on the services that we're providing? And then the third pillar is our culture pillar. And so the culture pillar is around everything that relates to talent, whether that is acquisition, development, coaching, retention, all of the individual aspects of that really shape culture sit within that bucket. Under each of the pillars, we have a variety or a series of goals, and I'm not going to go through all of the pillars, but did want to highlight the culture pillar. So we have 2 primary goals. First is that Erdman will be the employer of choice, as evidenced by our ability to attract top talent. The culture index, which is what we measure through the OCI. We also use an employee satisfaction engagement score that we'll talk about a little bit later, retention metrics, and the feedback that we receive from candidates. So if we are trying to pursue somebody and we're not able to attract them to the organization, or if we do attract them to the organization, we want to understand how did they perceive Urban, what was unique, what was different, how did they look at the way we behave and the way that we value culture. And then Urban will be known for its constructive cultural leadership anchored in our values. So that's tying back in that foundational component, our common purpose, which sits in the expanded statement of the mission, and then celebrating all levels of the organization by our OCI and employee survey. So in the planning process, each year, what we do is we look for gaps in terms of, how are we moving the organization towards those measurable goals? What do we need to, focus on, in that 1 year or 2 year period? And this graphic, which I'm not going to read through all of the bullets up here because there's quite a few, but within this graphic, what we're starting to show here is each year there's tactical things that fit within each of those different pillars, whether it's around market, delivery, or culture. The ones that are in the light gray at the top are the ones that are more specifically related to culture. And so as you look back to 2012, where we went private, the initial piece there was really the formation of the senior leadership team. How do we get development plans in place around those individuals? Do we have the right individuals on the team? Do we even have the right functional structure of the team? What do we really need to look at around that? That's also where we initially defined those strategic pillars. While we have revisited our frame, those pillars have been continuous throughout this journey. We've never deviated from that. And we also formed a variety of other teams within the organization to start to get leverage. So initially that was around recognition, communication, employee events. And as we start to move through the journey, in 2015 is where we started to bring in that outside facilitator piece that Brian was speaking with, in terms of individual coaching for a variety of different SL team members to try and help them live more fully into the blue. We started to really look at other types of round robin structures and those types of things that Andy will go into in the SLT meetings. We launched our Inspire program. That Inspire program is a 1-year program that we take individuals through that helps them understand, how can they communicate around issues, do that constructively to resolve problems within projects, not making it about the individual. We also really started to look at competency-based job descriptions. That's where we made that shift also to 60% of the job description being more about values and leadership than it is the technical. We look at all of the individuals we have here are going to be strong technically or they won't be here. So how do we really then focus on those values and the leadership? And then as we, I would say, accelerated growth in the journey in 2018, we started to add in additional programming around the Urban experience. We relaunched the Urban Excellence Award. This was an award we had in the past. But with its relaunch, this is an award where team members are nominating others in the organization around their behaviors and how they are living into the values. And then the winner is selected by employees that serve on a committee to read through those. And that's one of the most impactful things I do every year is read through those stories that come in with those nominations. And then in 2019 and moving on, we're now focused on how do we build that leadership pipeline? How do we advance in terms of a great place to work? How do we continue to really build Urban Experience 2.0, which is starting to add innovation, knowledge sharing, and all those types of things. And while this was going on the top, you really can't lose sight of what's in the dark gray in the bottom. So a lot of what in the dark gray was the efforts that are around the other two pillars as we adjusted to a very changed market environment. We also shifted to start unbundling, so to speak. In the past, we did all of our projects fully integrated around our complete offering. We moved to an environment based on the shift in the market that we now offer consulting distinctly from architecture and engineering and or development or construction. That meant our team members had to start working with external partners. It introduced variability into projects that we needed to get under control. And so in 2018, while we're doing all the work on the top, we actually had 16 cross-functional teams working on the bottom to design and implement our project delivery framework, which is what drove a lot of the financial results and the consistency and the margins that Brian will speak to later.
So I'd like to take it just a step further and provide some context into how we started to make those changes culturally. So as Brian and Rustin have both mentioned, it started with us as leaders, our self-awareness and our willingness and readiness for self-development. So that was a really key moment for us as we entered into that 16, 17 kind of time frame. And so how we did that was to start asking what good looks like. So as we define leadership specifically, what does good look like as we're achieving our 5-year strategic plan where we want to be the employer of choice and have this constructive culture? What kind of leaders do we need to have, and what kind of environment do they need to be creating and supporting our team members? So we got pretty specific with the leadership competencies, and you can see that outlined here on the screen where it talks about one, learning, you're coming in, kind of learning about yourself, again, that self-awareness at that level, all the way through executive. The middle level is when you start to take on actual people leadership. So we take that change very, very seriously as folks come in and impact culture, impact our people, very specific about what good, and I would even say what great looks like there. So one of the stories I would love to share with you is around accountable leadership behaviors. So the ins and outs of our senior leadership teams, ups and downs in this really 10-year journey from this last era. I specifically recall in the beginning of the pandemic when we were probably in about the July timeframe when the whole world's realizing that this really isn't a 2-month sort of thing. So emotions are setting in, the real financial sort of challenges are setting in, the people impact is setting in. So as we looked at that, I think that as the emotions came in, it was a clear time for us to anchor back to the kind of behaviors that demonstrated leadership. So, and there's a litany here of 25 that are not on the screen, but really the importance of one voice, alignment, taking responsibility for what our team members would experience here at Erdman, as well as our clients, of course. And so really intentionally anchored in behaviors. So as we got that a little more under our belts, we went into the development of some of our tools and not only using them ourselves, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, but then starting to use that with our high potential sort of leaders, the people that really were hungry for leadership, and then certainly ourselves. So some of these tools we were using prior, obviously the leadership impact was a newer entry to our toolkit. But certainly really pivotal. So that leadership impact, that was our first really formal view of a 360. So understanding what our team members thought of us, and more than thought of us, how we impacted their behavior specifically. So that was a really important baseline measure for us to come in and take individually as leaders. So that was a very important piece, coupled with two that we had somewhat in play, which were the DISC, and that was more around communication style, learning to meet others where they were relative to communication and what was most effective, and then MBTI, the different and welcomed differences in those personalities and our leadership types. Later in the journey, I would say about 2 years ago, as we were starting to get a little bit better at some of the impact and the effectiveness of our leadership, we wanted to say, okay, well, what's next? Now, what does great look like? So we wanted to really get intentional about our emotional intelligence, understanding that, especially coming through COVID and all of the challenges with the market, really understanding what that emotional component did to our effectiveness. And then along the lines of tools where we were really developing kind of our own development profiles, like how were we getting better and moving closer to what good looks like. The one-on-one form that you see here on the lower left, that particular piece is the current iteration. That is not how it started, but the intention is the same, which was level set in relation, like how are you doing personally, how are you doing professionally, Brian and I, Rustin and Brian, we were all anchored in this and started that from the very beginning. And then it went into what kind of business challenges do you need help with? What have you tried? And then it talks about what are you especially proud of or what has been accomplished in the last month. And these were monthly and still are monthly. And then lastly, and I think importantly, because it started to set the foundation for trust, is what feedback do you have for me? And not only tell me the good stuff, like we actually started to get more and more honest with each other in terms of what worked well, what didn't work as well. And that was a forum every month to be able to safely and constructively practice that feedback giving. And then in terms of the senior leaders who meet we meet every 4 to 6 weeks. With that, in the very beginning, and then it continues annually, we did a simple exercise called a round robin, and that is that middle section here where we're saying, okay, let's just get really simple. What is something I should start doing, stop doing, or keep doing to be most effective and have the greatest impact on the company leadership, certainly the teams and the team members within our company. So that's something we would prepare coming into the meeting. So it wasn't just a wing it, sort of give you feedback, like give some substantial thought to that, because people were counting on each other. There's an accountability factor to say, we need this feedback to be able to grow and learn. So while it might have been uncomfortable, it was invaluable. And then we've continued that, again, every 4 to 6 weeks as we meet more formally as a senior leadership team to talk about what we have been focusing on since the last time we met. So it's a continual sort of progress or progression. And then we say, okay, here's what I've specifically done. What other observations do you have? What other feedback? We'll take some congratulations along the way. And then certainly if you've seen something that's impeding my ability to have the biggest impact, please tell me. And in fact, don't wait until this meeting to tell me. Tell me that as soon as you see it. So that's kind of the cadence and the trust that we started to build once we got into this flow of giving feedback. And then ultimately, also, what help do we need? So what would it look like if we're a high-functioning team? I'm doing everything I can to develop myself. You're doing the same. Now, what can we do together to be the most impactful? So this toolkit is how it stands today. I anticipate changes moving along, but this, if I could look back 10 years and say, let's start, it would have been awesome to have this in our pocket as we got started. So this add-on now is we're looking at more of the talent development piece. So this is about career progression, and it's really exciting because we're getting good at understanding where people want to set goals, where the company is going, and then the overlay of that synergy. And so as that's happening and we're aware and we're coaching, not only are we taking those previous tools into play, but now we're saying, okay, great, this is where we want to go. And then competency-wise, this comes back into play. This is always in play. How am I doing as a leader, as an individual team member here? And then how am I living into the values and my positional competencies? And then being able to see if I am on mark for my particular role, if I may be a little bit further than that shows I might be ready for some more responsibility, or if I have some challenges, I may need to have a focused sort of development plan on a particular item. So that allows us to go into our system, and the system is new as well, where we can see all of these sort of development related pieces, including the Inspire training, which both Brian and Rustin have talked about, as well as its predecessor, the Leadership Academy. So the Inspire training is a really important piece. So it grounds our future leaders. And again, our future leaders are the people that are showing aspiration, commitment to Erdman, the capability to lead people or big functions. We want to be able to kind of understand that and be able to launch them. So this program, it's about 13 months by the time we're said and done with that. And so as we look at that ranges in a variety of topics. And more importantly, it's about how do you take those principles that are taught, and then you come into small coaching groups, and then you get a chance to practice those. And then you go into the next session. And so what we're doing too with newest iteration of the Inspire program, which begins here in April, really focusing on a company issue that needs to be solved. So rallying this team of 12, in this case, this is our next cohort coming, looking at identifying business challenges, working together not only across the team of 12, but the team of leaders, the team of the extended urban family, and how do we solve for whatever that opportunity is. So lots going on relative to, we talked about identifying the people that are our champions and our experts and the people that are hungry to lead. That's what this program does. And then last but not least, there's been a little bit of mention of some of the organic growth that's happening. So as these leaders are self-identifying, kind of coming into their own relative to their leadership and understanding the impact they can have, and this is at all levels of the organization, there have been informal teams that have come together around how do we become great at communicating. So what does great communication look like? And so some of the things that come out of that are a refined way of looking at all calls, instituting more meaningful, dialogue-driven town halls, our tech wall that shows off a little bit of what we're proud about, and celebrating not only professionally, but maybe personally as well, in a variety of channels that we communicate with. The recognition team, so what does recognition look like when we're doing it well? So when we're attracting the best, and importantly, keeping the best here, living and growing and impacting lives together toward our goal. And then certainly we have some social fun where got a coffee crew, Thirsty Thursdays, that sort of thing. So a lot of fun that's had along those lines. And then bringing our leadership to community impact. So that's been a really rewarding extension of this work that we've done. So we can see, well, first of all, we can surface and we understand all the different things that people are involved in and all the lives that people are impacting and improving outside of the urban walls. So not just clients, it's communities in which they live. So we are looking at expanding that a bit and getting even more involved in our communities. And one of the other success stories the last few months has been the innovation team. So one of our newer team members brought this idea, was able to kind of plant the seed and bring along some other people that had some passion around it. So we've recently instituted the Ingenuity Award, in addition to some of the other things that we were looking at, always looking at design that's evidence-based and serving clients. And then certainly the other kind of process improvements that we can bring forward after action reviews, being the thought leaders that we know we are capable of being, and then certainly our extended leadership team and our operations leaders. There are also small teams that form around kind of the technical expertise, so things like senior living or in healthcare, or little niches that are involved with each one of those. AXP is another one that's listed on the very bottom, where those are people in our architecture area who are pursuing their registration. So with the affinity groups, those are like gold people that want to come together and work together toward a similar goal. So some of the other ones are maybe a little more social in nature, but field and stream. So those might be some of our hunter and fisher people. So those sorts of things are happening along with things like women in the workplace. So lots of organic, employee-driven, employee-fueled sorts of activities going on, which is just an amazing thing to be in. Lots of great energy and lots of good momentum for the future.
So we thought it might be helpful to kind of walk through what this journey looked like in a couple different scales, between the individual level, the senior leadership team level, the organizational level. And this is a leadership impact report or circumplexes from one of the members of the senior leadership team, an individual that joined us in 2016, incredibly talented individual technically, in terms of understanding operational systems design, all the technology that supports that, those types of things. But as he came into the organization and started to try and implement change around a variety of different things, got frustrated with some of the resistance or lack of adoption that was occurring. And so after he was with the organization for about 9 months, took his first leadership impact assessment that you see on the left side there in 2017. And what came out of that assessment you can obviously see is, quite a bit of perception around red and green behavior versus a, perception of leading into the blue. And so this individual, being highly data driven, definitely dug deep, into this report, wanted to understand it. And I think a key component of all members of the team is their willingness and receptiveness to receive feedback, hear that feedback, and then really start to understand how can I behave differently. And so this individual, partake in the round robin discussions, one-on-ones with myself, with Brian, with others, really became, I would say, quite vulnerable in terms of sharing that report with all of the individuals that directly reported to him, as well as individuals more broadly, and saying, hey, I understand, how my leadership is impacting you, and I want to understand, how can I model different behavior that would be more effective. And so over a couple-year journey, as that individual, leaned into different methods and means, I would say also became much more of an active listener versus a teller. You can start to see the really dramatic shift that individual had in the growth of their blue behavior. And I'll say this was almost exclusively a focus on how do I grow and lead into blue. It really wasn't how do I stop being perfectionistic or how can I be less oppositional. Those naturally moved in as he grew in those blue behaviors that you see on the top. And so as you look broadly, beyond this one individual to really start to look at the leadership team as a whole, we realized we needed to move as a team first, before we could really move the organization as a whole. And as we went through that process, there were changes in the leadership team. We found ways to become much more efficient. As we condensed or contracted the leadership team, we found meetings got a whole lot more efficient, decision-making got more efficient, but all of us were trying to work within those tools that Andy was talking about. So when we meet every 6 weeks, we're providing an update of what have I worked on around my leadership over that last 6-week period. And then periodically we're stepping broadly back and doing those round robins. We have consciously moved from that idea of, permitting or wanting to fully expecting feedback. So, if you're part of the team and you see behavior that is inconsistent with blue, how do you give somebody feedback, hopefully in the moment? If it's not in the moment, it's immediately after, so that they can respond to that and adjust. And as we ventured through that journey, you can see how the circumplexes have evolved around the leadership team. And similarly, then how does that start to impact the organization more broadly? And so this one is the entire organization going back to 2016. And then as you move through 2018, 2020, you can see the growth in there. And this is also while we were making major changes in the organization. So we are moving into different markets. There also, you'll see that there's some contraction in the number of individuals on the top. We exited an entire service line. So we used to have a steel manufacturing and wall panel manufacturing business that really had become much more of a commodity that was better to buy in the market than a value-driven component that was core to our delivery. So we moved away from that. We made those shifts in the unbundling, offering our services independently versus exclusively fully integrated. And we moved into a new market with senior living, added development. And so the last time we measured the culture piece was right before the pandemic, right as the pandemic started in 2020. And then we're excited to measure it again this summer. Our cycle is to measure it every 24 months, kind of given the amount of time and effort it takes to really create meaningful change. We also then measure on an engagement survey. This is a legacy tool. We've used this tool for about 20 years. We may continue to maintain this tool because of the history that we have in the database, the trending component that's there. We do get a very good response rate. Our last year's response rate was about 91%. The organization that provides the survey says historical participation is usually around 60%. So we do feel like this is kind of an all voices heard engagement survey, so to speak. And you can start to see similarly where we moved culture, what was happening around employee engagement. So in 2013, it was fairly low coming off of the public ownership, shifting to private. We were trying to put a lot of systems in place. We got some good initial growth there in 2014, 2015. In 2016, we started implementing a huge amount of change. That's where you started to see the implementation of that project delivery framework. That's also where we moved into additional markets. We started to exit or move away from certain types of things. We had some gaps in the leadership team, quite honestly, that we needed to close, myself included, in terms of how we behaved. And so as we worked on that in 2017, 2018, we really started to see a big lift from 2018 to 2019, similar to the big shift that you saw in the culture index. And then I was very happy that we had all of that in place, because where we hit 2020 and the pandemic started, being in healthcare and senior living, our markets were very disrupted. And prior to the pandemic, I will say we had a very office-based culture. And literally at our corporate headquarters, we had 72 hours to shift to a completely virtual environment. And so we really leaned on the culture, the behaviors, those types of things that we had as an organization, as we adjusted and watched projects literally stop on a Tuesday and restart on a Friday. It was very, very disruptive. So we had a little bit of a dip there, and I'm super excited to see where we're going to be in 2022 with that.
And so moving forward into 2022, I want to kind of cast the vision of what's next for us. And so we have been working with what we define as our next level leaders. Those are typically people that are reporting directly to the senior leaders or have oversight of a big function within the company. And so we had done an initial LSI, ILF, so that is the lifestyles inventory or index. And so with that, we had 29 people that took that 2 years ago. And so you can see by both the self-description how those 29 leaders saw themselves, and then how they were described by others. So there's about 300 people that were describing a variety of, some of those were overlapping people. So you can see there that we've got a really solid foundation. We know what blue is in this grouping of folks. And we have a great opportunity in front of us. So coupled with everything that we've learned, the tools that we have in place, the openness to trying new things and evolving, and importantly, using those five different tactics that Brian talked about, that is really where we're heading. So looking at opening up that opportunity for our future leaders. So again, making culture equally important. So our very front end market part of our business, our delivery part of our business, and then our culture part of our business, all equal. So how do we do that together and advance the culture? We need this team to come along with that journey, actually lead that journey. And then certainly we'll be doing the other things where we're helping kind of help them understand where are they in their journey, how ready are they, what can we do to help them get ready, and keep the focus moving forward. Again, with long-term vision and short-term sort of initiatives. So this literally is one of our short-term initiatives. How do we work with our next level leaders to invite in and create this extended leadership team to really strengthen and continue to nurture our culture? And then staying steadfast with that. So that consistency, that persistency, even in times of frustration, making sure that we stay focused on the big goal, the constructive goal that we're trying to achieve together, which anchors back to our pillars. And then inviting our key leaders, identifying who they are, who's hungry, and who's ready to be our champion, and really weave that into all of our cultural efforts. So very excited to step further into our journey, and hopefully a year from now we're coming back and talking with this audience on our success with this particular piece.
Thanks, Andy. So I just wanted to review some key results so far from our sustainable culture journey. A lot of what you hear about with the OCI and the engagement, those metrics are embedded in our plan each year. So we have long-term goals around that. I'm happy to report, we are in the top 10% of engagement for the last 3 years, that was being in the top 10% was a goal outlined in our strategic plan since 2012. So that's been a good shift. We've seen significant shift to constructive behaviors, as Rustin and Andy highlighted. This also has allowed us to recruit the right people. So our hit rate on recruiting and fit in the organization is higher than it was before. And primarily because when you talk about our culture and how behavior expectations that you have, people I think that have more of an ego or an individualistic approach probably doesn't really want to come work here because they won't fit in. And that's a good thing from our perspective. So we're attracting the right people. I like to call the shift from recruiting to attracting, and are we attracting the right people to our organization? And then profit's always important. And we've seen a significantly improved margins and reduced variation across our book of business. In construction and architectural and engineering, there are things that happen all the time, and our teams are doing an excellent job coming together, solving those problems with our clients, and really producing great outcomes. From a client standpoint, we've got a number of Erdman fans out there. Our repeat business is strong and increasing. Our referral network is strong and increasing. We have a Erdman fan program. We actually have 5 former clients working for us or with us in this organization. That's always awesome when you have a client that wants to come join your company because of their experience with us. We hear often, I know Rustin and I hear this quite a bit, is that it feels different to work with Erdman. So our clients feel the difference in the behaviors that we're doing, which I'm very proud of our people and their interaction with our client base. The community involvement, increased community involvement throughout. We have a lot of people involved in what they're passionate about in the community, which is awesome. I'm continually amazed at the different things our team members are involved with in the communities we serve. Our organization has shifted to a charitable culture. So in most of what we do, it's really around how are we improving people's lives, how are we improving the patient outcomes, client outcomes, how are we improving the community that we live and work in. And then increased awareness of our brand because of the community impact. I'll tell you that there's been board meetings from some of the organizations that we've contributed to where Erdman's been brought up as a shining star, I guess, about how to raise funds and get involved with things, and that's always great to see. And then as equally important, how's this impacting our people? There is a willingness to help each other here in this organization about having each other's back. And so people can come in here and ask others for help in a lot of different areas, whether that's work-related, life-related, home-related, what have you. There's that sense of community and family here, and we got each other's back. The empowerment that's gone on, Andy talked about a lot of the initiatives our team members are making through a lot of these teams and improvement ideas. It's not coming from the executive team, it's coming from our team members, which is great. And then just as importantly, again, the work we're doing here, because we're all human beings, isn't just restricted or confined to the walls of Erdman. These talents and skills about how to have better relationships, better communication, how to handle yourself in times of stress and to be more constructive, that carries into the home environment and other relationships outside the walls of Erdman. And I have numerous stories of employees talking about how these skills have improved relationships with their spouse or with their child, or how they've dealt with some other thing in the community that was challenging for them, which is awesome to hear. So again, just 5 actionable takeaways. Make this strategic. There's a lot of pet projects you can do that labeled our culture, but hopefully you got the feel for how important this is for Erdman. And I would highly recommend you make this a strategic effort. Assess your leadership team's capacity. They need to champion this. If they're not, your culture efforts will quickly fall away because you just don't have the leadership there to really demonstrate. All eyes are on leadership individuals and organizations. I know that. That's one of my takeaways from round robins is, hey, be aware everybody's looking at you, Brian. So you need to have a leadership team that's going to carry the flag and champion the journey. Create long-term vision, short-term initiatives. We talked about annual initiatives, but we break those down by month, by quarter, by month, and when we're starting, when does it end, and so on. So a lot of rigor into our planning. Exemplify consistency and persistence. Again, this isn't about creating a miracle. It's about showing up every day and demonstrating leadership behaviors, creating good habits, breaking bad ones. Pretty simple, but it is hard work for a lot of people. It was hard work for me. And then invite your team members to do great work. As a leader, I've always envisioned my role is to create an environment for people to step up and step into and help them be successful. It isn't to tell them what to do, but it's to create an organization where our team members can do great work and feel really good about what they do and have an organization that has each other's back that you want to be part of. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Q&A, but I am going to pull an audible here. In today's environment, with everything going on in the world, I've got an ask for all of you. Hopefully got some takeaways. I've got one more. Write down name of an individual that's impacted your life. I'm asking you to do some homework here. And over the next day or so, reach out to that individual and thank them. And depending who it is, tell them that you love them. And we need more of that in this world right now, especially with things going on overseas. And you will have an impact on that person's life. And I think it'll make you feel better as well. So I'd ask you to do that. If you had one takeaway from this presentation, it would be that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian, and thanks to the three of you. It's amazing to see the journey you have all have been on, and to not only see it in the data, but to hear it from you all and how you truly role model and have embedded those constructive styles. I know we always feel it through our interactions. And just a side anecdote, I was actually out on leave when you went through your 2020 results for the OCI, and I remember coming back and seeing them and just, yes, it's all this work has paid off, and it continues to shine through. So thank you again for being here and for sharing the journey. So we want to open it up for Q&A now, and we've had some great questions come through so far. So the first one I want to share is, how did you know there was a culture issue back in 2001? Did you poll the company?
You want to take that one, Brian?
Yeah. Coming off of a second generation family owned business, you can imagine it was very factioned. So, construction didn't appreciate our designers didn't like construction managers, et cetera. And so you just knew there was an issue because of the behaviors being demonstrated in the organization. And me and couple of our executives went off site and really mapped out what behaviors we want to see and what we don't, and define that toleration level that we were willing to accept. And then really started that, combined with the survey results that we got back, we knew we had a problem. So it wasn't a healthy environment, I would say, for being constructive and helping each other out. It was very individualistic, departmental focused. And that really launched us into a lot of the efforts that we talked about here.
Great, thanks for sharing that feedback. Another question was, who set up the Inspire program? How did you establish that, and what services or resources did you use?
Andy, you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take that along with Brian. It was definitely a team effort here. So kind of the same sort of scenario where we started to identify where some of the gaps were. So we actually did quite a bit of networking, trying to find, who was the best at leadership development within the area. So we actually had at least one company that came back and was referred a couple different times. So we started to partner with that organization and customized our curriculum to kind of meet the Erdman piece, and then layered in the culture constructive sorts of pieces as well. So that's when it started to take the form that it took in the 2017 timeframe, 2018, and now it's gotten better and stronger with each iteration.
The learning approach definitely shines through of how you take that feedback and the programs and initiatives evolve over time. So great to hear that. Another question, does your organizational success mean growth in the future, say mergers or acquisitions?
I can start there, Brian can chime in. So, I think we're expecting the talent market in our space to be challenging for a long time. And so, growth through acquisition versus organic growth is something we would always want to look at in terms of meeting our needs and serving our clients in the market space that we're in. But at the same time, an acquisition of an organization that would be a cultural misfit would definitely be something that would be a stopping point. We wouldn't want to do it just to acquire market share or talent base or those types of things. Brian led our last merger when we went public, and so you might have some additional thoughts.
Yeah, I think stepping back to our planning process, acquisitions are not in our current frame, so we would be opportunistic about that. I know Rustin and I both get opportunities for acquisitions across our desk every week or so. We've done some diligence on a couple of those, but nothing's panned out. So our strategy calls for organic growth for the foreseeable future. Our recruitment's been pretty darn good considering the environment we're in. So that is giving us confidence we can grow organically without needing to go acquire talent right now. That could change in the future. You never know. But right now, we're continuing an organic strategy.
Excellent. One clarifying question, can you reiterate what the SLT and OLT are?
So the SLT is our senior leadership team, and it's composed of myself, Andy, individuals that lead our healthcare and senior living vertical, and operational and development functions for the organization. So it's really the functional leaders of the organization. Our operational leadership team is composed of managers and other individuals within functional areas. And so the idea is, senior leadership should be setting vision for the organization, mapping where we're going. And OLT should be capable of identifying tactical issues that could improve the way that we deliver services. And so the OLT meets, I believe it's every 3 weeks.
Yep.
And so they'll identify a variety of different issues to work on and solve cross-functionally.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. What's been an unexpected outcome you experience through going through this process?
Well, for me, I think we each could answer that probably. I think just the two things, the coalescing of our team and how that's had a positive impact in the marketplace and on our job margins. When you start this stuff, it's great journey and you want a good environment, but the, I guess, side effects that you have in terms of your relationships with your clients, your improved profitability, you're able to cut through. There's very little drama here. You're able to cut through, get decisions made. Everybody's aligned around that, and you move. And so that's been a pleasant surprise. And then, as equally important to that for me personally, is hearing the stories about how our people are impacting and improving relationships outside work, whether that's with a child or a spouse or something to do in the community. I love hearing about that.
I would share everything that Brian mentioned. The other piece I perhaps would add to that is, how this also can start to influence other things like the foundation of trust, that you have within a team. So where do you get to that highly efficient conversation that Brian's talking about? It feels different to have a conversation and walk away knowing that there's nothing that wasn't left unsaid in that conversation. When you get to that type of exchange back and forth, the level of trust just goes up immensely.
And I would say the same as the two of them. And then I would also say the bonus piece has been the integrated thinking. So one of the things Erdman it's really based around is bringing these experts together. And it's not just experts technically, it's these experts that are really great human beings. So the power and the impact that we have together has been more than I ever could have imagined. And I think we're just at the beginning of it. So really exciting for me.
Great. Well, we are at time and we've had some other comments come in around this is so inspiring. I love the attention to this. Amazing work. Thank you for sharing and inspiring. And I can only reiterate those points as well. This has been so inspiring, and we're so thankful to be a part of your journey. And I'd like to reiterate, if you can advance the next slide, Andy, just a thank you to the three of you, Rustin, Brian, and Andy. We are so honored to be a part of this journey and are so appreciative for you sharing the journey thus far, because it's not over. It's continuing and sustaining the amazing work you've been doing. And thank you to all of you who have joined and been a part of this discussion today. As we mentioned earlier, the recording and PowerPoint will be available in the next 48 to 72 hours, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. And I'd also like to reiterate the takeaway that Brian encouraged us all to think about of thanking someone who has left that impact on you and being sure to tell them that. So I'm already thinking of a few that I need to reach out to today. So thanks for the inspiration, and we thank you all and have a great day.